Start today's Daf Yomi is Kiddushin Mem Zayin, Kiddushin 47. We're going to start the last two words on Mem Vav on Beis 46b. The Gemara is discussing that there were three cases from the Mishnah. The first case of the Mishnah where a person says, a man says to a woman, become betrothed to me with this date, become betrothed to me with this date, become betrothed to me with this date, Mekudeshesli Bezu, Mekudeshesli Bezu. And in that case, the Mishnah says, as long as one of those dates is worth a pruta, then she's going to be betrothed. We view them as separate acts. But then the Mishnah has the next case, which says, where the man says, Mekudeshesli Bezu, 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 become betrothed to me with all of these. Then he keeps saying, become betrothed to me with this, with this, with this, with this. Then the Mishnah says, under those circumstances, you can combine all the dates, and as long as all of them together are worth a pruta, then we're going to say that she's betrothed, as long as all of them together are worth a pruta. Then we have the third case of the Mishnah, where he says, become betrothed to me with this, and as he's giving her the dates, she's eating them at the time. And the Mishnah says, if one of them has, the Mishnah says, under those circumstances, if one of them is worth a pruta, if one of the dates is worth a pruta, then she's going to be betrothed. So the Gemara wants to know which case, this third case of the Mishnah, which is it referring to? Is it referring back to the first case where he says Mekudeshas each time? Or is it referring to the second case where he just says Mekudeshas once? So the Gemara's first approach that's offered is the suggestion of Rav and Shmuel is that it goes back to the first case. And the Chiddush is that even though she eats it right away, and so her ana is immediate, still it has to be worth a pruta. So the problem with this approach is because what's the big Chiddush there? Of course, it needs to be worth a pruta. So then the Gemara brings the second approach of Rabbi Ami, which is that the third case of the Mishnah is referring back to the second case of the Mishnah, which is where he says betrothed one time. And so therefore he's saying and she eats it, she's going to be betrothed. But the problem with that is then what about the fact that she's being betrothed with a loan? So he's saying as long as the last one that she eats is going to be worth a pruta, then she's going to be betrothed. And why is it a loan? Because the assumption is, and that's how Rav is going to start. The assumption is when he says, become betrothed to me with this, he's not done speaking until he finishes speaking. And so then the initial statements that she says are basically she's taking the date before he's finished. And so therefore it's become like a loan that she's taking. So that's what Rava says. Well, Rava says, when do we say that this case, that if she eats the first date, it's not going to combine with the second date to make a value of a pruta, but it's only the last date that she eats has to be worth a pruta. Rava says on top of Memzayin Amar Aleph, Shana, when do we say this law? Ela de Amar La Bezu Bazu Uvazu, where he says to her, eat, you're becoming betrothed to me with this, and with this. That means to say that he's intending to complete his remarks. Aval Amar La Be'elu, but if he says to her at the beginning, with all of these, then under those circumstances, then if he says then even if she eats the first ones, we're going to combine those first ones with the latter dates to make them worth a pruta. Because when she eats the dates, she's eating what belongs to her, because he's saying you're going to become betrothed to me with all of these. And so therefore, we're going to combine all of them together. And so therefore, as long as, even though she ate it, we're going to combine it. That's a distinction that Rava is making. So, and Gemara says we actually have a brisa supporting Rava. Tanya Kavasa de Rava. We have a brisa supports Rava. If he says to her, Hiskachuli balon, an acorn, berimo, a pomegranate, bagel is a nut, shamarla, or he says to her, Hiskachuli be'elu, and this is case number 2 of the brisa. He says, come betrothed to me with these. Im yesh bekulan, if all of them combine are worth a pruta, yesh bekulan shava pruta mekudeshes. If all of them combined are worth a pruta, she's going to be betrothed. V'im lav, but otherwise, Aina Mekudesha. So if they're all combined, is worth a pruta. Otherwise, she's not betrothed. V'imlav Aina Mekudesha. But let's say the next case is Bazu, Bazu, Ubazu. Become betrothed to me with this, and this. Miyesh Bekulam Shava Pruta. If he says to her, become betrothed to me with this, and with this, if all of them are worth a pruta Mekudeshes, she's betrothed. V'imlav Aina Mekudeshes. Otherwise, she's not betrothed. So that's the third case of the brisa. So the Gemara is going to discuss these cases, and then we come to the last case of the brisa, where he says, "Bizu nitolaso v'achalto." He says to her, "Become betrothed to me with this." She takes it and eats it. Bizu nitolaso v'achalaso. He's saying, "Become betrothed to me with this," and she takes it and eats it, and v'od bazu, she keeps eating it all along the way. Then one of them needs to be worth a pruta, or else she's not betrothed. So now the Gemara says, let's analyze this brisa, and we'll see how it supports Rava's halacha. So the Gemara says, "Hi ba'alon berimon be'egos." When he says to her at the outset, "Become betrothed to me with this acorn, this pomegranate, this nut," what's it referring to? Hechidami. What's the scenario? If you want to say that he said to her, "Oba alon, oba rimon, oba egos," if you want to say he said to her with the acorn, the pomegranate, or the nut, if you want to say that it means that if all of them combined are worth a pruta, she's betrothed. It can't be that that's the scenario. Vaha okamer means either this or that or that. You don't need all of them. Ella must mean ba'alon berimonu ba'agos. Must become betrothed to me with this, with the rimon, with the egos. Well, it can't be that that's the case either. Hainu bazu, bazu, bazu. That's the case to become betrothed to me with this, and with this. So that's like that's exactly the next case of the brisa. It must be elav de amar be'elu. So it must be become betrothed to me with all of these. But it can't be that it means to become betrothed to all these combined. Amiditani seifa. That's the next case. Oshamar is gachli be'elu. That's explicit. We call the ratio of be'elu askinon. Must be that the first case is not be'elu. So the Gemara says yes, it is be'elu. That when it says the pomegranate, the acorn and the nut, it's pirushika mefarish. If he says become betrothed to me with the pomegranate, with the acorn, the pomegranate, and the nut, it's explained in the next clause of the brisa. Eskachli ba'olam barima ba'agos ketzad. What's it referring to? You're going to Amrullah eskachli ba'elu. Become betrothed to me with these, and meaning altogether. Vikotani seifa. And the next case is bezuna toaso v'achalto. He says become betrothed to me with this, and she takes it and eats it. Meish ba'achas me'em shava pruta mikideshes. That if one of them is worth a pruta, she's betrothed. V'imlav eno mikideshes. Otherwise, she's not betrothed. V'ilu reisha lo kamaflik. Whereas in the first case, in the case of be'elu, it doesn't draw this distinction. In the first case of the case of be'elu, it doesn't draw this distinction between if she eats it or if she leaves it aside. Shema mina. So we see from here that there's a distinction where that even by elu, even if she'd be eating along the way, like Rava said, we would still be able to combine them. Shema mina kol echad amar be'elu. Now, wherever she said a case of be'elu, wherever he said to her a case of be'elu, ki ka'achla minafsha ka'achla. That she's eating it, but at that point it's on her own. She's eating it, and it's all going to be combined. And so we see from here that this is a fundamental distinction between the language of bazu, bazu, bazu. If she's eating it along the way, we're only as long as the last one is worth a pruta, it's going to be betrothed, but we don't combine them all together. Whereas be'elu, we do combine them, and that's the proof from the brisa. So now the Gemara says, yeah, but this brisa only works according to the position of Rabbi Ami, who had said that this case of where she eats it refers back to the case where she's betrothed, where he says the language of Mekudeshes at the beginning, at the outset. And so therefore we're saying that the last one is that we don't combine them, and because it's a language of Bezu, 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 it's all different ones, because she's eating along the way. But if you say Be'elu, then we would have combined them. But according to Rav Shmuel, they said that third case of the brisa is referring back to the first case, and the chiddush is that even though she eats it, it has to be worth a pruta in order for it to be a val betrothal. So the Gemara says, it only works according to the position of Rabbi Ami, who says that it refers to the second case. And when he says, unless you're betrothed, when it says in the Mishnah, unless one of them is worth a pruta, the last one has to be worth a pruta. So that's what we're saying here by this case, until the last one is worth a pruta. But El Rav Shmuel, the Amri Travayu, Rav Shmuel, what's their position? Areisha Kai. That when it says this case of the eating, it's referring to the Reisha, the Ochalas, it's teaching us the Chiddush that even though she eats the dates, they still have to be worth a pruta in order for her to be betrothed. So in this case over here, it's only listing cases of klali. It's only listing cases where he's speaking in general. It's not listing the cases of the specifics. The price is only referring to those cases where he betrothed her with a lot of fruits in general, and not in a case where he's betrothing her with one specific fruit. And when it says so therefore when the Bryce says if one of them is worth a pruta, she's betrothed, what's it referring to? So the Gemara then says, no, this third case of the Bryce, where it says bezu, 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 and bezu v'natolaso v'achlaso, bezu natolaso v'achlaso. Bezu, what's that referring to? So he says this position, this is the position of Rebbe. This is not consistent with the position of the Mishnah, but this is a different position, the position of Rebbe, who says Loshna kazayis kazayis, Loshna kazayis ukazayis. It doesn't matter if you say an expression, and this goes back to a statement of Rebbe from Zevachim. Ayin Sham to see the full case. Rashi refers to it over here, but it's a complicated. It's a case of referring to different thoughts you have when you bring a carbon. That Rabbi says there's no distinction if you say kazayis kazayis or you say kazayis ukazayis, that you're both listing out, you're being specific. And so too, therefore, they're going to say that Rav and Shmuel say that this case of the Bryce is referring back to this position of Rabbi, and it is being specific, and it's not referring to a klali, to the general case, and a reference to the eating less than a pruta. So therefore, we now go back to the Gemara is now going to go on to the more fundamental sugya of can you betroth with a loan, because the basis of the question against Rabbi Ami's interpretation, basic understanding of Rabbi Ami's interpretation was that you can't be betrothed with the first date because that was a loan, and you can't betroth with a loan. And so that's why Rav says, "Hamikadesh b'milva ain't a mekudesh." So the basis, why does Rav reject Rabbi Ami's position? Probably because Rav is saying that if you betroth a woman with a loan, you're not going to be betrothed. She's not going to be betrothed. Why not? Meaning, say the man says to the woman, "I lent you $100. Don't pay me back." Well, you're betrothed to me by not paying me back that $100. Rav says, "Hamikadesh b'milva ain't a mekudesh." She's not betrothed with that approach. Why not? Why isn't she betrothed? Rav explains, milva lo tzanitna, because a loan, you gave out the loan was supposed to be spent. And so therefore, she doesn't have that money anymore. And so therefore, you're not betrothing her with anything of value. Milva lo tzanitna. And so therefore, since it's not there, Rashi explains, the borrower was able to spend this money. And he's not responsible to keep the money around. The avamina is, oh, I'm giving you this money, but you have to keep it around in case I ask for it. No, I gave you the money, and now you can use it however you want. Giving the Lord's son, it's like her money, and so therefore he's not giving her anything now. So therefore, Rav says, let's say, why? Well, this position of Rav, is Rav interjecting himself into an earlier dispute? Because we learned, we have a price that says if you betroth a woman with a loan, she's not betrothed, and some say she is betrothed. So maybe Rav is like following the Tanakama that brisa. Isn't that brisa just saying the Marasavar Milva Lo Tzanit? No, Marasavar Milva Lav Lo Tzanit. Isn't one of them just saying that a loan is meant to be spent, and so therefore she's not betrothed, like Rav says, and one says a loan is not meant to be spent, and she is betrothed. Gemara says, "V'tizbra, do you really think that that's the way to read this brisa?" Ema Seifa, the next part of that price, so it's Vishavam B'Mecher, and both agree that if this was a sale, and if he says, I want to buy, let's say, your cholent pot, and I'm buying it to you with you don't have to pay me back the $100 you owe me. He says that kind of everybody says that works. Now, Amr Milva son, and if you're saying that the loan is supposed to be spent, then then how is he buying that cholent pot? So Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman explained, Huna Chavrin, Huna, our colleague Mukim Miwe Ochrai. He said that this price that we tried to attribute Rav's position to is one of the shitos of this price. He says that this price is referring to something else. It's referring to a case where he said to her, become betrothed to me with $100. In the end, turns out he only gave her $99. And so one position is that she would have been too embarrassed to ask for the extra dollar back. And from the fact that she didn't ask for it, he didn't give her the money. And the fact that she didn't ask for it means she's just too embarrassed to ask for it, but he owes her that money. And so therefore she's not betrothed. And so therefore she's not betrothed in that circumstance because he shorted her the money. The other one is no, she's not too embarrassed, and she waived her rights to it. And so but it's not a question about whether or not you can in general betroth a woman with a loan. It's just a question in this case whether this type of forgiveness works. So therefore the Gemara says, so that's Rav's position. Rav's position is a malva, mekadesh b'malva, ain't a mekudesh. If betrothed with a loan, it's no good because the loan was given to be spent, and so therefore there's nothing in existence now. The Gemara says, well, what about this case of Rabbi Elazar? The Rabbi Elazar. The Rabbi Elazar says, it's kadshli b'mana, b'nasan la dinar. He says, become betrothed to me with this $100, and then he gave her $1. Harezu mekudeshes. Then under those circumstances, we're going to say she is betrothed v'yashlim, and he has to make up the extra $99. So why is Rabbi Elazar saying his shita as his own position? Why doesn't he say it fits into one of the shitos of those Tanaim? That meaning to say that it's a valid betrothal just as to make up the money. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, no. Amri mana chaser dinar kasifole milsel mitbar. No, in a case where he gave her 100 and just shorted her $1, then she would be embarrassed to ask, look, he gave me $99, but he stole me another dollar. She'd be embarrassed to make that claim. But mana chaser tishim v'teisha. But if he says, I owe you 100, but he didn't give her 99 of it, meaning he only gave her $1. Clearly, he hasn't paid her yet. Well, kasifole milsel mitbar. Clearly, she wouldn't be too embarrassed to ask, and so therefore, Rabbi Elazar has to make the position. It's according to everyone that she's not betrothed until he gives her the money. Meisvei. So now the Gemara is going to challenge Rav's position. We're going to challenge whether or not Rav's position is correct. And the first case comes from the Brisa, that the Brisa says, Omar Leisha, if a man says to a woman, Iskad Shili B'Pikadon, Shili Yeshli B'Yadcha, he says, become betrothed to me with the deposit that I have in your possession. Means say, I gave you a watch, become betrothed to it, or maybe a watch, not a good example. He says, become betrothed to me with this bundle of wheat that I gave to you in your possession. And then v'hocho matzaso shenignav o she'ibed, and then he finds out that the bundle of wheat was stolen or lost. Im nishtari menu shava pruta, but if he says, if there's a pruta that's left from it, mekudeshes, she's going to be betrothed. Then we'll have in a mekudeshes. Otherwise, she's not betrothed. As long as there's a pruta left, she's betrothed. Otherwise, she's not. Milva, but if it would be a loan, if he says, become betrothed to me, if he comes betrothed to me with this loan that I lent you, this money, even though at the end of the day they don't find any of that money, she's going to be betrothed because with the benefit of not having to pay him back. And so that seems to be directly contradicting Rav's position. Because Rav says, Mekadesh Milva ain't a Mekudesh. So Rabbi Shimon Elazar says in the name of Rabbi Meir, Milva Re'uke Pikadon. He says, no, it's the same halacha between a loan and a deposit. Just like by the deposit, even that it's only if there's a Shava Pruta left is She Mekudesh. So too by the loan. Ad kan lo pligi, says the Gemara, Tav Mem Zayin Amud Beis, El Demar Savar Milva Afagav Dulin Shtari Mena Shavar Pruta. They're only arguing about whether or not a loan has to have a pruta left in order for it to be a valid betrothal. Marsa, so one is of the position doesn't need to. Marsa Nishtari Mena Shavar Pruta in Vilo Nishtari Mena Shavar Pruta low. Whereas Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says it does require a Shavar Pruta in order for the loan to be valid. But everybody agrees but everybody agrees, not like Rav, that if you betroth with a loan, it's going to be a valid betrothal. So therefore, this is a direct refutation of Rav. So Amar Rava, the Gemara's answer to this question is that the Bryce, so the source we're citing, is not an accurate source. One of the things that the Gemara did was figure out the accuracy of the sources in front of them. And so Rava says this source can't be relied upon. But Tizbra, do you think this source is logical? Hamitarat, do you think this source makes sense? Hamishabashi, this source is not correct. It's a corrupt source. Hi Pikadon Hechidami. What's the case where we're talking to her where he says, if you become betrothed to me with this deposit? And the initial case of the Bryce who says he become betrothed to me with the deposit, that it needs to have a penny left or a pruta left in order for it to be valid betrothal. So, what's the scenario? If she accepted responsibility, for the deposit, that's a loan. And if she didn't accept responsibility. And then if you're saying she didn't accept responsibility, then why would the Bryce move to the next case, the second case of the Bryce about a loan? It should have moved and discussed niflog v'nisna b'didei. It should have drawn the distinction within the deposit itself and said, "B'medvar, when do we say with this deposit that as long as there's a penny left, it's a valid betrothal." That's where where she wasn't responsible for the deposit. But if she was responsible for the deposit, but if she was responsible, for the deposit, then it automatically became a loan, and so therefore, even though there wasn't shav pruta, she's betrothed, and so therefore the whole source doesn't make sense. This is how you need to explain the brayza. Uba milve, if as it relates to a loan. This is how Rav would explain the brayza. As it relates to a loan, as it relates to a loan, even though there is a pruta remaining, she's not going to be betrothed. But Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Mishum Rabbi Meir, milva, that in the case, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, in the name of Rabbi Meir, milva by a loan, harei kipikadon. It's going to be the same law as a deposit. It means to say that there needs to be a Shava Pruta left. And okay, what's the nature of the dispute between Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar and the Rabbanan? I found the Rabbanan of the Academy of Rav, the Yasi V'Kamri, and say, what's the dispute between Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar and the Rabbanan? The nature of the dispute is b'milva b'reshus balim l'chazara v'hu adin la'onsin kamifli. That they're arguing about the nature of a loan. If somebody lends somebody else money and the money hasn't been touched yet, so the cash hasn't been touched yet, does that mean that the person who lent it, the lender, can demand it back? And also, if all of a sudden some unforeseeable circumstance will destroy the money, that's their argument. Tamar Safar, that Mar Safar, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is on the position Milva B'Reshus Ba'alam Kaima. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is going to be in the position that the loan is going to still remain in the domain of the owners, v'hu adin, of the original lender, v'hu adin la'onsim, and so too with respect to accidents, that the borrower is not responsible for an onus that happened to him until he begins to use the money, and so therefore he thinks that the lender is able to betroth the woman with this money, because since it's not yet in the domain of the woman, so therefore at the time of the betrothal he's giving her the money, and so therefore that's the machokas, that's the position according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. But the Tanakama is going to be of the position that the borrower is always responsible. and the lender can't take it back, and so therefore you can't betroth with the loan according to the Tanna Kamma. And then the Rabbah continues, and he says, "V'aminalahu." And I said back to these rabbis, everybody agrees that no, it's in the domain of the borrower. And so if that's why do we say it's in the domain of the borrower? My time that the borrowing the money is no different than borrowing an object. Just like an object which you borrow and you have to return it exactly, you're responsible for any accidents that happens to it. And there you have to return the exact same thing. So it's even less than yours because you have to return the exact same thing. Milvol Kolsha came for sure a loan where you could even substitute the money. For sure, the borrower is going to be responsible. So therefore, Rabbah says, I think that they're arguing about something else. What do I think they're arguing about? I think they're arguing about but Milva versus Bala Muchazara. They're actually arguing over with respect to. They're actually arguing about a loan that's still in the domain of the person who lent it, whether or not the person you gave the money to, if he hasn't used it yet, if you can demand it back. And so that's the only, as long as he hasn't begun to use it, are they able to stand it back? And so the Gemara says, so the Gemara says, so if you want to say that that's the nature of the dispute, what about what Rav Huna says? Let's say somebody borrows an axe from his friend and uses it to chop wood. Kano, he acquires it. Lo bikabo lo kano. But if he hasn't chopped wood with it yet, he hasn't acquired it. And according to you, you say so that this is a dispute whether or not he starts using the object. Let's say he follows the position that it only becomes the borrower's once he starts to use it. Gemara says no. Rav Huna's position is not dependent to this dispute. Where are they arguing in a case of a loan? Because a loan is money, and you don't have to return the exact money. You don't have to return the exact coins. You can just return any money. But by an object, which you have to return the exact object, everybody says you only acquire it once you actually start to chop the wood with it. So the Gemara says, let's say this din of Rav with respect to somebody who betroths with a loan is actually a dispute amongst the Tanaim. Name a Tanai. Let's say it's a dispute because if a person says to a woman, it's Gachli Bishtar Chov. If he says, become betrothed to me with this money, become betrothed to me with this IOU that I have on somebody else. Basically, I have a note. Reuven has a note on Shimon, and he says to Rachel, become betrothed to me with this note that I have on Shimon. Or if, let's say, he has a loan, that he gave to other people, and he writes her our shah, like a power of attorney that you could go collect this loan. Or Meir says so let's say Rav is like the position of Chachamim. So that's what the Gemara is suggesting. So, and the Gemara explains, hi, shtarchov hechidami. What is this first case of the IOU? If you want to say it's a note on other people, milva biad acherim. Well, if that's the case, what about hayim milva biad acherim? That's exactly the second case. So it must be ella shtarchov dida. It must be that it's a note he has against her. And that's dispute. He's saying, I have a note against you, and I want to betroth this to you. That's what it says in the first case. It's a note he has against her. So that's the position of Rav, who says it doesn't work. And the position says it doesn't work is Rav. And the position of Rav Meir is arguing with Rav. So the Gemara says, no. No, it's a note on somebody else. And the first case is a note with a contract, and the second case is a note that's an oral loan. And so it's not an actual note, it's an oral loan. So those are the two cases. So the Gemara says, but we're going to stop the discussion here. God willing, we'll pick this up. We'll repeat this at 8 o'clock this morning, and then at noon today. And then the Daf Yomi on both days of Sukkot will be at 6 p.m. A big shkoyach to everybody. And